This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, real MVPs? Ricky Widmer here, along with the Mark Weber.
What's up, Vinny?
And we are back for another edition of the Onside Kick right here on Most Valuable Podcast, your one-stop shop where we talk about everything going on in the NFL week after week. And I know what you guys are thinking. You're sitting there going, guys, you weren't on video last week. You did a call-in podcast because Mark couldn't be there. I thought I was going to see you guys yet again this week, but yet again I am looking at the logo. What is going on? Another call-in podcast for this week, but it doesn't matter. We do so well each week that we're just doing another call-in. Schedules didn't work out, but we wanted to give you guys something here because, Mark, it is finally, we will never have a podcast segment until February, I want to say, where we're not talking about football games this year.
Yeah, this is finally when we can get excited about things because, preseason's all right, but you can never care too much about that. This is finally when we can get excited about some actual football because, depending on when people are first checking out this one, there might already be a game. If they're watching it Thursday night or later. There's actually something going on. I mean, this is perfect. This is what we've been waiting for.
And we got a jam-packed show for you guys this week. We're going to be talking about, I know Dave and Sean did a little bit of a Bears-sided reaction, being big Bears fans. A lot of us at MVP are. I'm probably the only non-Bear fan, along with Brandon, but Brandon's still a Bear fan. So I'm the only one that has no affiliation to the Bears with MVP. They were excited about getting Khalil Mack over the weekend. We are going to look at Khalil Mack, but on the side of the Raiders, what the hell are they thinking? Then we're going to look at the interesting situation going on in Buffalo with their starting quarterback, Nathan Peterman, getting the starting nod. We're going to kind of see what's going on with that. And then the last topic we'll do before our week one picks will be what should we expect from Sam Darnold. He will be the only rookie quarterback to start week one. He will be doing that on Monday night against the Detroit Lions for the New York Jets. And then, like I said, we're going to end our podcast with our week one picks for this week in the NFL. But, Mark, let's start off with this Khalil Mack trade. And before we get into everything, just to kind of put the trade out there, this was from Adam Schefter over the weekend. According to his source, the Bears got Khalil Mack. They got a 2020 second-round pick from the Raiders and a conditional 2020 fifth-round pick. The Raiders from the Bears got a 2019 first, a 2019 sixth, a 2020 first, and then a 2020 third-round pick. I know we're going to talk about the Raiders, but really quickly at the beginning, because you're a Bears fan and because you weren't able to give your 2 cents on the topic that Sean and Dave did, what were your initial thoughts when your team got Khalil Mack from the Raiders?
Yeah, I heard some people kind of talk about it and some rumors that not even fully rumors. I mean, just like people kind of hoping, I think, is more what it was, that the Bears could be an option. They could be a team that would do it. And I didn't buy it. There was more people talking about, well, the Packers are probably going to go for it. And I was I was a little prepared for that to maybe happen, but I was also pretty set of like, come on, there's no way the Oakland Raiders will do this. Like, they can't. I mean, this is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. There's no way they're going to let him go when he's so young that you have to keep him. I actually, because, I'm an old person and I go to sleep at a decent hour, I woke up to the news via a text from Sean, actually. Sean had texted out about it, and then I looked up some information, and I was just shocked that this would be something that was even possible, that this was an option. And, you think about this defense, which is already a top 10 defense, and it's just so exciting because you make a top 10 defense even better. Not only is it just a player that's going to dominate, but it's a player who will make everybody else on that defense better in turn. So, people sit there and they're like, yeah, what's Khalil Mack going to do for the Bears? And I'm like, honestly, I don't really care what Khalil Mack's going to do, like his stat-wise, because he's going to do his thing. But he's going to get double-teamed and all that type of stuff. I care about all of a sudden what Leonard Floyd's going to do, what Roquan Smith can do now, what Goldman can do. I care about what those guys get to do because now they're going to get help. And pass rush has been something that's been a weakness in this defense. It's been okay, but it's been a bit of a weakness. So now it's just going to be something where you don't have to think about it. You don't have to be concerned. And that's going to be huge for this team. That's young. And I think the one thing, this isn't a Bears topic, so I won't dwell on the Bears too much, but the one thing that really cements it in for me is Ryan Pace isn't kidding around. He is saying the John Fox era was the rebuild. The rebuild is done. We are here. We are now a team that competes for the playoffs. That's what he's doing with this. He's got his idea. He's shown that he's aggressive, and people have had questions about certain things he's done, but he showed that he believes in things, and he's going to make it happen. And I appreciate this final sentiment of, no, look at everything we did in this offseason. The Chicago Bears rebuild is finished. It's time to actually start competing for the playoffs.
Well,
and beyond.
Yeah, and I mean, now to move on a little bit, like you said, not to dwell too much on the Bears, because if you guys want to hear all about that, the 34-plus minutes, you guys can go check out the segment that Dave and Sean did over the weekend that is now live on the YouTube channel and like iTunes and podcast services around the world. But the thing that we'll look at is the Oakland Raiders, because the thing that confuses me, there's two things. Like, first, I was reading an article earlier today from silverandblackpride.com. That's the SB Nation site for the Oakland Raiders. And like their writer, Levi Damien, he put it, and I'll read it here. Initially, it was thought that the Raiders received a couple first-rounders and perhaps a player or another high pick. Not only did they not get a player or a high pick, this last sentence he puts in all caps, they sent the Bears a second-round pick along with the best defender in football. Not only that, you look at other articles where they were talking to the GM of the Raiders, Reggie McKenzie, and his quote was, "My whole thought process was to get Khalil signed. It was at the end, in the final hour, that it just hit. It hit hard and heavy. It was not a plan to trade him at all." And I think to myself, I'm like, so if it was, like, that's the thing that I don't understand with the thing I need a question answered, and I don't have this answered after reading that quote, is you're the GM of the Oakland Raiders. If you didn't want to trade Khalil Mack, why was a trade made? To me, it should feel like the GM should be the guy, unless like it was a thing where ownership was like, no, we got to trade him. We're not going to pay him. It should never be that the coach goes, no, trade him. No, the GM should have the say over the coach. The only way Khalil Mack should have been traded is if ownership told Reggie McKenzie, no, we are trading him, get it done. Or, hey, we got it done behind your back. I'm not going to say anything went down. That just confuses me. Like, you're the GM. You want to get him signed. Go get him signed. Like, why was a trade made? What do you think is going through the Raiders' minds and why this even happened on an Oakland side?
There's so much to
unpack. We may be here all night.
I'm glad that we're calling in for this one because it's going to be a late night, but it's interesting. And you mentioned McKenzie, and the thing that fascinates me from the get-go with this, after this happened, people were saying John Gruden and Khalil Mack had never talked. Mm-hmm. Since John Gruden came here, they never had a conversation. And then, going further into that, people were saying that McKenzie wanted to keep him. That John Gruden, I don't know if it was from the get-go or from early on, very beginning or just early enough, that he was saying, maybe we trade Khalil Mack. He was the guy who supposedly was saying we should do this early on is what was being reported. Then McKenzie says, that it essentially was just a last-minute thing, that they just weren't getting it done, and the Chicago Bears offer was just too good to pass up. Then you go even further into John Gruden saying basically that, no, it wasn't him. He didn't want to do it. And he kind of starts to put the blame on Reggie McKenzie. And from the get-go, with this organization, with this coaching regime of John Gruden, the guy they're attached to for 10 years now, and he has partial ownership of the team now, he is already starting this bickering kind of back and forth, and he could go either way, whichever one you want to talk about, of like who's really in control. And when he first got there, they were saying that the personnel decisions would be collaborative. They would all be involved at that, which makes you wonder, like, who really has control of these personnel decisions? Was that just saving face for McKenzie to be like, oh, no, yeah, it's still collaborative. I'm still in there, guys. Don't worry. When in reality, John Gruden says, yeah, you can sit in the room if you'd like, but you make sure you don't talk. What is that? Because this does not seem like something that makes sense. It doesn't make sense from either standpoint for sure, but it certainly doesn't make sense for a coach like John Gruden, who made his name by having strong defenses and other things as well, but he always had good, strong defenses, is going to immediately come in here and be like, yep, let's get rid of the best defensive player on our team and possibly the best pass rusher, one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. So that's just such a shocking thing to see. Now to move into something else beyond that, and whether John Gruden's hire was a good move, whether his personnel decisions are a good idea, no matter how influential he is in that, it's interesting because one of two things, I go back and forth on how I look at this. You look at the draft with P.J. Hall, with Arden Key, with Mo Hurst. In the draft, they hit the defensive line. 2 defensive tackles and a defensive end. They went in there and they got guys who they thought were going to be good. And, they got Bruce Irvin and stuff like that. They've got good players. They had Khalil Mack, who makes everybody better. I think that, wouldn't a guy like Arden Key play better learning from Khalil Mack, or Hall and Hurst? Wouldn't they play better with Khalil Mack being on the field at the same time as them? These young type of guys who got some things to learn. You have that. But maybe it's also this part of they really do think that, hey, Arden Key is going to be really good. He's going to be a really good defensive end. We believe in him. Not that he's going to replace Khalil Mack right now, but he'll do well enough with some of these other pieces we got as well that we can survive without paying this guy this high price. Because, the thing that I look at when I think about the Raiders side of this is the opposite of the Chicago Bears. Ryan Pace said with this move, the rebuild has finished. We are ready to compete. We are here to win Super Bowls. That's what we're thinking about. I think actually it was just today that Nagy, I think it was, that was saying, every day we think about winning a championship. That's what we think about. The flip side now with Oakland and with John Gruden is I think this is their way of saying this guy's going to demand a lot of money. Our team does not have all the pieces it needs. We just got this new coach. We've got all these pieces to work through and these things to work through. We can't afford to pay this guy too much money. Let's get a couple of first-round draft picks, and let's use those to build more pieces. And I kind of look at it as the Raiders saying, we need to go back and we need to rebuild. We are not ready yet. And they are not necessarily hitting the hard reset button, but they're not that far from it. With how hard they hit the defense in this just past draft and how they kind of got these old veteran players that I'm assuming that this next draft, offensively, these veteran players, I'm assuming that this next draft they're going to go and get some young offensive players to learn from these veterans or something. it just, to me, it seems very obvious that what's happening right now, whether it's McKenzie, whether it's Gruden, some combination of both of them, are sitting there and saying, our team is not where we want it to be. We don't have the right pieces, and we need to do whatever it takes in order to reset and get the vision that we have. And I think with that type of a mindset, it's got to be a pretty heavy John Gruden decision of saying, I need my type of guys. I need my mindset. He needs his Gruden grinders, right? Apparently Khalil Mack was not a Gruden grinder. And they're going to do whatever it takes. And for any Raiders fan that had high hopes for this team, I think now after this trade, you sit there and all of a sudden you're like, well, I thought maybe the Raiders would win 6-7 games, but hey, maybe we're looking at 4 or 5 wins now. It definitely puts a different context to where this Raiders team is at.
Well, and I mean, the thing that I'm sitting at is this deal was done. Like, you're mentioning John Gruden's name a lot, and that's exactly it. Like you mentioned earlier, he can try to pass the buck to Reggie McKenzie, and Reggie McKenzie could then try to pass the buck back to him. This deal was made by John Gruden, and one of the quotes I saw today, I can't remember where it was on Twitter, it was basically, how do you not have the money to pay for Khalil Mack? You give John Gruden the contract that you gave him over 10 years. That's how you don't have the money to pay Khalil Mack. And to me, I've always felt like you said, they weren't talking in the beginning. John Gruden never wanted Khalil Mack on this team. Never wanted him on this team. He's not a Gruden grinder or just a Gruden guy that was going to be on this Raider team. The big thing is, why didn't you get more out of the trade? Which we'd be talking in circles about what they could have got, what they should have got. But the Raiders right now kind of almost remind me of the Timberwolves in the NBA, where the Timberwolves have Tom Thibodeau, who's their head coach, who is also the president of basketball operations, and their GM, which is Scott Layden, is kind of like only an advisor to Thibodeau. He's not really, in my mind, a GM, where that's what this move reminds me of, where it was like John Gruden made the call on this. Reggie McKenzie had no say in this. And for the Raiders, like you said, they got to hit on these draft picks because especially next year, they're going to have 2 first-rounders. They're going to have their own in the second round, and then they'll have their own in the third round. They'll pick up, the only additional pick is that 6th-round pick. The question is, do you believe in the guys do you believe in John Gruden drafting in the first round? And the reason why I say that is think back to this past draft. Gruden sent the 10th selection to Arizona, where he got a 1st, a 3rd, and a 5th. And then when he made that selection, he went ahead and took Colton Miller, where there were numerous guys I would have taken above Colton Miller. I don't know. Guy who went 2 picks below him and Derwin James would have been nice. A guy who went 18 to the Packers and Jair Alexander would have been nice. Hell, a guy who went to the Cowboys who could have been a pass rusher for you in Leighton Vander Esch would have been a good choice. Like, that's also a thing that I look at is, yes, Gruden got a first-round pick, but what are you now going to do? Is the plan to use both picks? Is the plan to maybe, depending on where they are, because if the Bears are a better team, their draft pick is going to go down. And if the Raiders are going to try to win games, which that's the goal of every team in the NFL, to win games, if you're a middle-of-the-pack team, then your first-round pick might not be, it might be both picks within the early to late teens. What is that going to mean? Then are you going to take 2 and going to try to trade up? Like, what is the game plan going forward? And for me, I have a hard time seeing the roadmap to success for the Oakland Raiders because, like, the guys you mentioned on defense that they picked up, I do like. Like, I like Hurst. I like Key. I like P.J. Hall. But are they going to be ready right away? Or do they think, hey, we didn't need Khalil Mack to be that veteran. We've got Bruce Irvin, who has won championships and have been with the Legion of Boom, who can be that veteran on the front line for those guys who are going to be coming up behind him. My biggest issue, though, with this is what's the roadmap? What is the plan for John Gruden and the Raiders moving forward?
Well, the good thing for Gruden is that he's got time.
Mm-hmm. He's got 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, if they get rid of him, they're still going to pay him for 10 years. You know, there's a lot of security and safety in that. And, you know, the funny thing for me is the thing I kept saying in predictions videos and when we do our hold us to them and stuff like that is that I actually thought that John Gruden, I think that it's just a little outdated. I don't think he really has a good plan, and I think it's going to fail on him. But I kept saying that I didn't think that year one was really where it would completely fail. And now I sit there and I'm like, well, I don't really see what they've got going on for year one. I mean, you mentioned Bruce Irvin, as I did as well, as a good player on that defense, but you added the extra detail in the Legion of Boom, and it's like, yeah, of course Bruce Irvin's going to be an amazing player when he's on the best defense. He's the kind of guy who greatly would benefit from Khalil Mack, you know, and now he has to be the best player defensively on that team, and he's not used to that. He's used to being around a bunch of studs. Even when the Seahawks kind of sort of started to fall apart a little bit, he still was around a bunch of studs. And now there's nobody. You know, there's nobody but him. And that's going to be an issue. That's going to be a problem. So I sit there and I look at this defense, which isn't very good, and not anymore. I look at this offense, which is okay. Like, it's a good offense. They got a good quarterback. They've got good weapons. But those weapons are weapons that were good 3-4 years ago. There's a lot of question marks about how they're going to compete now, this year. And it's just difficult to see this team doing well. So all of a sudden where I was like, yeah, they'll have a good year, but then they'll take a step back. It's like, no, they're going to quite potentially kind of bottom out immediately. You know, this is a team that now I'm looking at them and thinking they're like a 4-win team. And that roadmap for the future, fortunately, they've got draft picks, but you mentioned Colton Miller, which is a big surprise, and a lot of people were sitting there going, that's not a first-round talent that you're drafting right now. And you have that, and you got a lot of draft picks, but what a lot of people were kind of being, you know, I shouldn't say a lot of people, it was Packer fans, you know, essentially, that needed a reason to feel good about week one. They were making fun of the Bears for losing draft picks. And they're like, oh, yeah, you didn't want to use those draft picks? You know, the Bears lost draft picks with Trubisky when they got him, when they traded up for Anthony Miller. You know, Pace has been aggressive with his draft picks, not afraid to use them. And the problem with being so stuck on draft picks, I don't remember who it was that said this one, but I think it was a former player on Twitter that immediately said that he was glad to see someone in the NFL finally not overvaluing draft picks. You know, when the flip side is that the Raiders are way overvaluing draft picks. Yeah. Because a draft pick, you have to get it right. And there's no guarantee that you are, and quite often you get it wrong. And it doesn't have to be that the player is a complete bust like a Jamarcus Russell. It could be that it is a good player, but they get hurt a little too much, or they really never quite lived up to that potential. It's very easy to go wrong with these draft picks, but there's no guarantee. And maybe John Gruden and his scouting staff is really going to do a great job of finding these guys. You know, John Gruden is good at scouting. That's something that he does a very good job at. But, you know, it's not just is this a good player? You have to have the luck on your side as well. And that's difficult when you're drafting what will probably be a 21, 22-year-old. and hoping that they translate to the NFL as well as they should.
Well,
it can be a rough road.
Another thing too that that Silver and Black Pride article mentioned that was kind of a head scratcher on draft day as well. So they get the 3 picks from the Cardinals, like I mentioned. The 15th they use for Colton Miller, the 79th, and the 152, which is a 3rd and a 5th. Then later on, 3rd day of the draft, they go ahead and trade their 3rd round pick, 75th overall, that 152nd pick, the 5th rounder they got from Arizona, and a 6th rounder to move up basically from 75th to the 65th to take Brandon Parker out of North Carolina A&T. It's like, what are you doing? You're trading 3 picks for a guy from a small school. And the thing I find funny is, especially with their first 3 picks, we could be looking back 3 years from now and being like, man, Oakland missed out. Because Colton Miller, guys behind him, Jair Alexander and Derwin James. You look at the next guy they took, P.J. Hall. The next 2 guys behind him, Isaiah Oliver, cornerback out of Colorado that people liked, and Darius Geis, running back from LSU. Brandon Parker, who they took first pick of the 3rd round, the guy who went exactly like the next pick behind him, Lorenzo Carter, linebacker that people liked from Georgia. So, like, I'm even looking at the Raiders' decisions from this past draft thinking this could be a draft where we look at, man, they should have went with that guy. And it's funny because usually the team Dave and I usually jokingly look at that with is the Bears drafts, where it's like you go to most of the Bears past drafts, look at the next pick behind the Bears. It's like, man, they should have went with him over the guy that they had taken. I just don't know what the Raiders are doing. And the only thing I do know is that John Gruden didn't like Khalil Mack, and that also I believe that this is John Gruden trying to send a message to his locker room, to his young players. Because you mentioned like, oh, he must not have been a Gruden grinder, but Gruden's a guy that he wants basically faithful soldiers. He wants guys that, because he comes from when he was last coaching, the whole sports landscape was completely different. And I know
Definitely.
that we talk about like the NFL compared to the NBA, where yes, the NBA, the players have more power than the players in the NFL, but still overall, players now have a lot more power than they did back then, especially with some of the contract negotiations. And this is Gruden saying, hey, if you want the money and we're not, like, I want you to be loyal to the team, not loyal to yourself, because that's what I think John Gruden thought with Khalil Mack. Not you're trying to get your money, you're only looking out for yourself, and that's why he traded him. And I think this was a message John Gruden was trying to send his team, like, hey, you play for the Raiders, you're like basically the Game of Zones thing for the Spurs. You put your soul in the box when you play for the Raiders.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. I don't necessarily doubt it. I just don't know. I can totally see it coming from Gruden in that sense. I just don't necessarily know that I buy it. You know, it's one of those things, and I think what's just been shown to Raiders players is if you do really well, it doesn't matter. You're not going to get rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to refuse to pay you until eventually they can trade you away and get something out of you.
I mean, unless you're a guy maybe Gruden drafted.
Maybe, but there's no guarantee in that either, you know. So it's kind of tough, and it doesn't look very good. You know, that's not something players want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
It's not something that they want to see. They're going to certainly be nervous about that. So I don't know. You can see what a lot of the fans are saying, or I'm sorry, what a lot of the players have been saying, and how they're a little
shocked.
Yeah, they're shocked. They're upset. They don't get it. They're all being good sports about it. They're saying what they need to say, which is good. But it's not... You can tell that it's not a great time to be a player on the Raiders at the moment. They're especially going right into week 1, and you're like, man, we just lost the best defensive player on our team.
Mm-hmm.
Now what? You know, it's kind of demoralizing in that sense.
Well, the one thing I'll ask you before we move on to the Bills is any final thoughts, anything that you think we did not hit with this that we need to hit with the Oakland Raiders and the Khalil Mack trade?
No, not necessarily. I mean, I think that there's a lot of uncertainty as to necessarily why, and I hope that we can get a little bit more of a clear answer one day of who really made this decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the thing that, of course, with any trade is that you'll never know exactly who wins and loses. That's why we didn't do like a winners and losers of the trade today, because we won't know until we see who the Raiders draft and what they do with those draft picks. But it'll be interesting to see where the Raiders are moving forward after trading Khalil Mack. And this is where you guys come in. Let us know what you guys think down below in that comment section. Raider fans, I know you're probably upset, so I'm not even going to ask, do you like it? Do you not like it? How upset are you, and what do you think? Do you think it was a Reggie McKenzie thing? Do you think it's a John Gruden thing? What do you think was going on behind the scenes? Let us know what you think, everything, down below in that comment section.